Welcome to our live virtual corporate and mergers and acquisitions, or M&A, practice area info and networking session. Excuse me. My name is Albert from Summer Associate Hub, and I'm proud to have all of you here. This is probably one of the most important sessions that we're going to have during the semester. A corporate and M&A practice is often the largest practice at a big law firm, and a large percentage of law students end up choosing corporate when they start as associates. But it is probably the least understood among 1Ls, primarily because the 1L curriculum, as all of you know, revolves around reading and analyzing cases, which is very litigation focused, and not so much around contract drafting and negotiation. So we put together this session to help you understand what corporate and M&A practice really means, what the day-to-day is like, and how to position yourself for a career in this area. So you can make better decisions, decide if it's for you, and stand out in the recruiting process by understanding the terminology and speaking the language of what M&A work actually means. This corporate M&A showcase is part of our Summer Associate Hub live virtual practice area series, where students can learn about what it's actually like to work in big law in different practice areas and prepare for the recruiting process at the same time. This is an all-star panel. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. The agenda is as follows. So we'll have a panel discussion featuring our attorneys from Proskauer, Willkie, and Goodwin. That will be about 30 to 40 minutes, including Q&A. After the panel discussion, each firm will host a separate Zoom room for those of you who want to join, ask questions, or listen to hear more about the firm. In the meantime, you can use the Q&A function to ask questions for the panel generally. I definitely encourage you to pop questions in the Q&A as the panel is discussing. And before we wrap up the panel, we'll also have some fun prize raffles for firm swag. Firm swag is the best, so definitely stick around. It's sponsored by each firm. You have to be present to win, so don't go anywhere. We'll post a link in the chat to sign up for the raffle. We'll be calling your name out to see if you're here, so just know that, and don't go anywhere. All right, before we jump in, quick intro. What is Summer Associate Hub? Summer Associate Hub is a free content and resource hub for law students embarking on the 1L and 2L recruiting process. I'm a former law student and big law associate. We know from our experience here how hard it is as a 1L to understand what it's really like to work at a law firm. Our platform, summerassociatehub.com, has blog posts, podcast episodes, short video tutorials and exercises, interviews with attorneys, and other content to help you learn about practice areas and prepare for the recruiting process. So it's a lot more than just these live virtual programs. We have a ton of awesome other programs scheduled for the spring semester, including all of our practice area and location showcases. And we'll include some information about that in the chat. All of those have breakout rooms hosted by each firm. So not only could you hear from the fantastic panelists, but you could also ask questions and meet them virtually. We're also in the process of planning an in-person networking opportunities this summer in New York City. So please stay tuned for that as well. Coming up tomorrow, we have our Bay Area locations showcase. Our Chicago showcase is on Monday, and our real estate practice area showcase is next Tuesday. So we'll pop the link in the chat for those of you interested in signing up for our future events. The best way to stay updated is to sign up for our newsletter, summerassociatehub.com/newsletter. If you signed up for this event, you're in luck because that means that you were automatically added to the newsletter if you haven't noticed already. Okay, so let's jump in. Oh, I guess, Laura, we'll start with you. So instead of me introducing everyone, I'm just going to let everyone introduce themselves. So Laura, let's start with you. Introduce yourself and your practice and briefly why you chose to be an M&A attorney.
Sure. Thanks, Albert, and hi to everyone that's on the webinar. My name is Laura Acker. I am a corporate partner at Willkie in New York. I have been at Willkie since I was a summer associate, so my whole career. My practice focuses, my practice is actually pretty broad, but I would say right now focuses on mergers and acquisitions involving both public and private companies, and I also work on capital markets transactions. So the reason that I chose to be a corporate attorney is first because I had a business background from my undergrad degree, and because I didn't want to be a litigator going to court, even though I don't know that that's what big law litigators do on a day-to-day basis, but I knew that that wasn't something I was interested in. So when I was a summer associate, I took the opportunity to kind of try a bunch of different practice areas, and I was drawn to the transactional practices, mainly because, they're anchored in parties coming together, working towards an agreement, and that was something that I really liked. And then I focused in on the corporate group because I liked that they were kind of the ones that were at the center of a transaction, kind of really overseeing the whole part of it. So that's what drew me to becoming an M&A.
Great. Mike, we'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Albert. And first, I wish when I was a summer associate, this resource was available because it really seems great. So Laura, you took
Yes.
kind of the words out of my mouth as to what I do and also why I do it. So Mike Ellis, I've been at Proskauer since I was a summer associate as well, 18 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. I'm co-head of our M&A group here. Um, so on a day-to-day basis, I work with both private and public companies. When we say public companies, we're generally talking about New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ listed companies. And I work with both strategic companies, so companies that actually operate and do things that we hear of, on a day-to-day basis, as well as financial players, private equity firms, sponsors, and the like. But I do lean more towards the strategic and operating company side. Another part of my practice is working with public companies, just in general day-to-day ongoing corporate governance, working with boards of directors, SEC disclosure, and things of that nature. I also have the opportunity, we have a very diversified corporate practice, so I have the opportunity to work with our finance group on various matters and our private investment funds group on matters as well. In terms of why I chose to be a corporate lawyer and M&A specifically, similar to Laura, I had a finance background. I was a finance major undergrad. I want to make clear, though, to everyone that you don't need that type of background to be a corporate lawyer or M&A person. Frankly, most people that I talk to don't have that background, and they do just fine. So don't let that scare you. And I also like the fact that I get to work with different industries every day. I never know if a particular deal is going to be in the real estate industry or healthcare or software or distribution or sports or whatever it may be. So you always get to learn new things.
Fantastic. Josh, over to you.
Hey, happy to bring up the rear here. My name's Josh Soszynski. I'm in the New York office of Goodwin. I'm in the private equity group. I would say the M&A practice that would, characterization that would describe best is probably deal maker, right? At the end of the day, that's how I view myself, right? Up and down the market chain, whether it's startup, emerging company, growth companies, buyouts, all those things mean different things. And we'll get into that in terms of this presentation, but a deal is a deal is a deal, right? And so on an international basis, right, for most of the time, private equity sponsors and their portfolio companies, but also different financial investors that are not public companies and represent them in the transactions that they do. I mean, I chose that because effectively it suited my personality best. I actually thought I wanted to be a tax lawyer when I joined the firm that I was first at. And then that summer associate disabused me of that notion very quickly. A little bit too back office. And so I wanted to be more on the forefront of the things that were happening every day. As Mike and Laura had alluded to, you're really kind of at the center of all the action when you're a corporate attorney, trying to get a deal done and effectively project manage. So all that, where the deal coalesced is where I wanted to be. And that's kind of why I chose M&A.
Great. And before we continue, just everyone, we just posted some links in the chat. Sign up for the raffle for Firm Swag. There's a link there, and then we're also going to be posting some links to sign up for the firm's mailing list, so you stay updated on the recruiting updates throughout the school year as we get closer to the recruiting season. There's also a Word document that we posted in the chat. This includes all of the Zoom breakout rooms, so make sure to stick around after the panel discussion to join the breakout rooms, and all of the links are in there. All right, so Josh, we'll stay with you here. So tell us more about your day-to-day and the typical matters that you'd work on doing deals for private equity funds.
Candidly, my day-to-day varies tremendously, right? Based on what the matters that I'm working on, which aren't always deals, right? And quite frankly, the conditions of the market, right? So, maybe in 2020 and 2021, when the market was hot, I might have been doing 7 different transactions, would have been a mix of growth investments and buyouts. Now, given the market, it's a little bit different, right? I'm doing other transactions that are more, save the company, nurture your investment, restructurings, out of court prepacks, things of that nature, which we can talk about. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of writing, sometimes drafting contracts. Other times it's talking with opposing counsel and trying to negotiate open issues. Other times it's speaking with my client on what those issues are and trying to come to the best position that we can formulate in order to get a deal done, knowing the other side's interests and our own. So, I mean, it really varies from day to day. It's a lot of talking, it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of writing, and it's a lot of problem solving. Because ultimately, when my clients call me, they're asking me to effectuate a transaction. That's the first and foremost. And 2, see them through all of the issues that arise in that transaction, whether that's commercial or just practical in terms of how to get it done. And so solutions-oriented approach is key, and I find myself always problem solving. wake up, all the time thinking about other people's problems. And I think that's really the existence of any good lawyer, right? You own your client's problems. And so day to day, whatever problem my client comes to me with is the thing that I'm thinking of. And that's very varied on a daily basis, whether I'm servicing the fund, doing the deal in order to get them a new investment, or helping them maintain or doing corporate governance on a day-to-day basis for their portfolio companies. Another word for the investments they already have. So pretty varied.
Great. So Mike and
I'll add
Laura,
one thing.
oh, go ahead.
I never
Yeah.
see a courtroom. Never see a courtroom, right? If the only time a corporate lawyer ends up in court, they've done something wrong or something's getting litigated. So at the end of the day, like I've been practicing now for 17 years and I've never once seen the inside of a courtroom.
Great. Mike and Laura, so you work as well with strategic buyers and public companies. So tell us more about what those mean, what those terms mean, and what your day to day is like working with those types of clients. I'll let you both chime in there.
Laura, why don't you go first?
Sure. So, to me, and Mike gave a little intro of kind of strategic companies where, in that sense, we just mean companies that are operating and have their own businesses. So it's not just a private equity firm forming a new entity to go make an acquisition. So strategic businesses picks up both portfolio companies of private equity firms, which we work with regularly, kind of standalone, large, private operating businesses, and then your public companies, the ones that are traded on the stock exchanges. So I think there you kind of, any deal you're working on for any of those companies, you're going to see similar issues to what Josh was referencing that he's dealing with for private equity sponsors. But I think day to day it's a little bit different, and there's just different flavors of it. Obviously, with a public company, you're going to have stock exchange rules, you're going to have disclosure obligations, and that kind of comes into play in a lot of different ways when you're dealing with a transaction. Kind of what disclosure obligations does the company have in connection with the transaction? Has the transaction been leaked? And how does that affect the stock price of the company or of the target if it's a public company? So it comes in a lot of different ways, but I think at the core, you're kind of doing the same day to day. You're talking with your client, you're talking with opposing counsel, you're talking with your team, kind of figuring out what needs to get done, what are the issues, and kind of what needs to get solved. So I agree with Josh on that front. A lot of problem solving.
Yeah. So the first thing I say is I had to go to court once, and it was not because I did something wrong, Josh. It was because we bought a company out of bankruptcy. So I had to go to the bankruptcy court for that. So that was the one time in 18 years I've been to court. But look, I generally agree with everything Josh and Laura have both said. One of the things I find interesting about working with strategic clients is I deal a lot more with, they're very focused on integration, right? And how the business that they're buying or the company they're buying is going to integrate with the rest of the company. So when I say that, I'm talking about how bringing in a whole set of new employees is going to mesh with the existing employees. Are there going to be different levels of compensation and benefit plans and how that works? You could see a lot of social issues if you're bringing in employees at a different pay level than the existing company. I deal with the insurance folks at our companies. You have to make sure all the insurance policies work together. I deal with the litigators at the company. They have to understand the litigations going on at the company, and it's really a focus of everyone working together to understand what it is they're buying, so they know on day one how to run and operate this business, fully integrated with their existing company. That said, sometimes when a strategic company buys a business, they keep it totally separate for certain purposes. But sometimes, dealing with those integration issues, I find very interesting.
Let me jump in and add one more thing to that, right? Because I think what's really interesting about public M&A versus private M&A is the people that you're dealing with. And I'll focus on the clients just for this bit of what I'm trying to convey. But I think, my experience having done a bunch of public M&A and represented a bunch of public clients is that it's a different process and it's a different risk profile for the internal in-house people. You're dealing with a bigger team compared to when you're dealing with a private equity investor. Private equity and deal team might be 3 or 4 people plus an investment committee that make all the decisions on the deal. The public company is going to have an infrastructure and a bureaucracy, right? All the in-house lawyers are your clients. You have to satiate them. If they're looking at an IP issue, you have to make sure they're happy or you can't move on the IP issue. It has to be run up through the chain. Everybody's a little bit more risk averse in-house because there's no upside to taking on risk in a lot of their shoes. Private equity guys are a little bit different risk profile. So at the end of the day, it's just a different experience, right? When you're dealing with a public M&A client versus a private equity client. And you're going to have a lot more like, well, we're under the auspices of all the sunlight of the public company arena. We have all the liability and fiduciary duties that come along with the public company arena. Everything is disclosed, so the spotlight is on us. So it's a little bit different environment when you're navigating. And a lot of what you do in those transactions is create a record to not get sued or to prevail when you ultimately do, right? Private equity has none of that. And it's a much different thing. So depending upon who you are as a person and what you like and how fast you like to do things or not, right? How much you like to pontificate on legal theories of law when you can have liability, one versus the other may be more suited to you.
Yeah, Josh, I think that's a great point. One of the other things that I really enjoy about public company deals, when we say public company deals, people are talking about different things. I find what I'm talking about now is when an acquirer buys a company that is publicly traded, as opposed to representing a public company buying another company that may be private. So you have all of those fiduciary duty issues. And when a deal becomes public, you automatically then get into the stage where, okay, are you allowed to solicit other bidders? Or do you have the right to go out and seek other bidders? What right does the board have to consider other bids in the exercise of their fiduciary duties? What fees do they have to pay in order to get out of the deal? That's something that I've always found interesting. That stage kind of once a deal gets announced, then what happens?
Like the wild,
that's
wild
a good
west in the public arena. Go ahead, Laura. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that kind of shows like one of the differences on things that you're negotiating when you're doing a public company acquisition. You're really focused on kind of the no shop, a go shop, kind of fiduciary outs. When the board can get out of it, what are the termination fees, which are things that you don't necessarily see in a private equity transaction or a private target deal where you're maybe more focused on, is there any post-closing indemnity or what's the purchase price? How is it adjusted post-closing? So I think that you certainly see different terms across the various deals depending on your parties.
Yeah, what Laura's referring to indemnity, that's when you're seeking recourse against a shareholder or a seller for breaches of the agreement. So it's interesting if you think about it, the public shareholders, who are they? They're us, they're family members, right? They're the public. You can't go after the public for breaches. But if you have a private seller, you can go after them for their breaches. So yes, that's the whole different dynamic of negotiation.
I love that we're getting into these nuances because these are things that I learned as an associate, and I wish I learned working as a specialist on M&A deals, and I wish I had learned these as a law student. And one thing that I think that I'm noticing from as a common denominator through all the comments, and something I learned as working on M&A deals as an associate, is deal complexity does not correlate with deal size. And it's oftentimes these other factors, whether it's public, whether it's a public deal or not, whether it's a private equity deal or not, or different issues that might arise with a strategic acquisition that makes the deal more fun and challenging and interesting. Although the numerical value of the deal is often what makes headlines, it's often not what correlates with deal complexity. It's something that's important to know as a student, and something I'm noticing from this discussion. Okay, so please, yeah.
Frankly, the smaller deals are oftentimes more complex. People are focused on every tiny issue as opposed to a multi-million-dollar deal where a smaller issue people don't care about.
Yep, exactly. Which is, I guess, as a student, when you're thinking about M&A work to do, it's oftentimes, I guess, looking past just the value of how big the deals are that the group does, and looking maybe a little bit past that when choosing a firm and thinking about M&A work. So yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Okay, so excuse me. So what is a typical, I guess, Mike, we'll start with you. You take this one. What does a typical M&A team look like when you're working on one of the deals that you're describing?
So I'm assuming you mean at the law firm level, because obviously there's a whole slew of professional advisors that we work with. But in terms of the team, the first step would be setting up the core M&A team. So that, oftentimes, given how busy we all know we are, given that people are on vacations or they're out or they're just busy with other things, often we'll have two partners. Sometimes we have one. That just depends. So either one or two partners, then we'll probably have a mid to senior M&A associate. and then some level of junior associates, depending on the scope of the work. If there's a big due diligence project, so when we say due diligence, it's reviewing, the legal contracts and other specifics of the company. If there is a virtual data room, for example, with thousands of agreements, we're going to have a much bigger junior associate team than if not. So the first step is setting that core M&A team. Then we bring on all of what we refer to as the specialists. So when we say that, we're talking about tax, we're talking about employee benefits, we're usually talking about IP, perhaps real estate, if there are important real estate leases or owned real estate. If there's litigation at the target company we're looking to buy, there'll be litigators involved. Maybe we're representing a buyer who needs to finance the transaction, in which case we'll be working with a finance team. I could go on and on. I mean, that's one of the great things, I'm sure everyone here will agree, in terms of M&A. You get to work with so many people at the firm, you get to meet so many different people, and you get to learn a lot about, by no means am I a tax lawyer or an employee benefits lawyer, but you could be dangerous at times. So it's really interesting to continually be learning and meeting new people.
Great. So Laura, as Mike mentioned, M&A deals often require a large team, a lot of different people contributing. It's always important for law students to know, and something interesting for them. What do the associates on your team do?
Sure. So, I think the associates play sort of a really critical role on all the deals, because I view them as the ones that are like the masters of the transaction and kind of making sure that everything is getting done and the deal is getting executed. So, as Mike mentioned, for example, they're making sure that they're keeping all of the specialists up to speed. You have a large team of people that are working on the deal at the firm, not just your M&A team, but everybody needs to be kept up to speed, know what's going on real time. A lot of times, I'm sure that, the people on the webinar might hear that associates are working on due diligence, which Mike alluded to, the virtual data room. So you're going in and you're learning about the company. And I think it's always interesting that often we have the most junior attorneys doing the due diligence, but it really is such an important and critical function on every deal, because we're learning everything about the company, we're synthesizing it for the client, and then we're also spotting issues. Here's something that's going to get triggered in the deal. It might require consent of a third party, or here's a bonus that needs to get paid to one of the employees. So there's just a lot of things that can come up, and that's, diligence is kind of really a foundational item to probably any M&A deal that we're working on. And then in addition, I think, the corporate associates are also drafting agreements, coordinating with the client, coordinating with opposing counsel, and just, like I said, kind of overall making sure the deal gets done.
Great. And before we keep going, just a reminder to check the chat. We have a Word document that in there with all the links for the breakout rooms. If you have any questions, don't be shy. Feel free to pop in the Q&A. It's all anonymous. And the links for the raffle and to sign up for the firm mailing list are all in the chat. We'll keep posting those in there. Okay, so Josh, over to you. As I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, the 1L curriculum at law schools are often very litigation focused, reading case law, crafting arguments. What can a student do to prepare themselves for a career in transactional work, in your view?
It's a tough question, because practically a lot of what we do and the experience and judgment that we gain, right, is really based on the deals that we've done. So just doing the job, candidly. I mean, if there's clinics where you can get a transactional sort of flavor for what you would be doing, that would be helpful. I think the best thing you could do is talk to people in the industry about their own experiences and see how that lines up with what your expectations are in terms of your professional career. You won't know it until you get there as a summer associate to get a real life sort of taste of it. I think you got to utilize that summer associateship to get like, as Laura had said, right? Like, you got to try as much as you can to get a sense of what you really want to do. Anecdotally, I thought I wanted to be a tax lawyer. I came in, did about 7 tax assignments in the summer and did about 17 overall, and ended up choosing corporate M&A because I thought it suited me the most. You really have to do this job in order to get a sense of whether it's something you could do. I had a little bit of an advantage because I worked as a paralegal, right? So I had worked in a law firm, a big law firm that had a large private equity client and did a lot of work for private equity. So I saw what was going on in the thing that I ended up. But if you don't have that background, I think You know, you got to get a little self-help. You got to seek out, right, newsletters, articles, get to know the industry, whether that's M&A in general, whether that's private equity, whether that's public company sort of advisory. Try to do a little digging, get a little smart. And then when you get in front of people who actually do it, right, seek those people out, search them out, ask pointed questions about what their day-to-day entails. Unlike litigation, right, corporate M&A is not something that is in the public, you know, domain as much as litigation is. There's no Law and Order corporate, right? There's none of that. And so like at the end of the day, you just have to do a little bit of help on your own, because you're really not going to know what you're getting into until you actually do it. But you can try to do a little reading, try to do a little talking with some informed people. I feel like that's the best bet at this stage of your career.
I guess the only thing we have is suits, which is probably not a good indicator of what it's actually like to practice corporate law. And that's a perfect
And
plug. I
don't
mean,
take
that's
succession as the other side of that coin. That's not the thing either.
right. Exactly. And it's actually the perfect plug, because one of the main reasons we started Summer Associate Hub was for exactly that reason. Hearing from people firsthand is probably the best way to figure out what you want to do in terms of a practice. And Josh is exactly right on that. So, okay, so staying on the same topic, and we'll love to hear everyone's thoughts here. This is a question that was asked in a prior session, and we realized that it should be a permanent question. So, what is the law school class that you felt was the most valuable for your career right now as a corporate attorney? I guess, Laura, let's start with you.
Sure. So I took a negotiation seminar, which I think is probably the most useful class that I took in law school. And, while I don't necessarily remember everything that happened in the class now, I'm sure that the skills I learned there kind of translate the most into what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis now. Although, I will give one plug, because I think candidates do ask this question a lot. I think you learn, you're going to learn the substance of what you do on the job, kind of to what Josh was saying. And I do think law school is such a great opportunity to try any of the classes that are kind of interesting to you, but maybe not something you want to practice. I think there's so many interesting classes out there and great professors. So I think you can also kind of take the opportunity to try something outside of the narrow lane that you think you're going to be going into.
Yeah, that's great advice. Mike, what do you think?
For me, the most practical course I took was a business drafting course, and probably a theme you'll hear from a lot of people that ask this question. It's a practical course, right, where you actually got to do something. So the way my course worked, first of all, it was at 8:30 in the morning, so there weren't that many people in it because it was taught by a practicing attorney. But I woke up and it was definitely worth it. So every week there was a different assignment. It was like, okay, this week is a distribution agreement. You'd give you a fact pattern, and then you had to go draft that agreement, and then you come back the next week and talk about it. The next week was a stock purchase agreement, and so a stockholders agreement, so on and so forth. And that really, at the end of the day, was probably the only really practical course I took in law school that applied to what I do on a day-to-day basis. There were things I actually learned there that I still remember to this day, that I look at it every time when I'm in like the miscellaneous in the back section of a contract that I learned in that course. I feel very strongly about, take courses that you're interested in, and I wouldn't necessarily focus on, stuff for the bar exam. I mean, I'm sure everyone on this Zoom is very smart, and they're going to just learn whatever they have to learn in their bar review. So I'd really take the opportunity to do what you're interested in at law school.
Yeah, this is all great. Josh, what do you think?
I mean, I would echo every one of those sentiments. I also took a negotiation seminar. I thought it was incredibly helpful, right? I liked it so much, I went back and TA'd it so I can get another bite at the apple, right? I agree that, if you can have a practical drafting course that will help you as you get past your first and second years, right? As a lawyer. For me, I think there's a couple of things that, were really helpful because I knew I wanted to do private equity after my summer associateship. There was one particular class in terms of structuring private equity and venture capital transactions. It was tax heavy. It was 40 Act heavy. There was a lot of things that really set me up to see the playing field of the business and industry that my clients are in and I was going into to service. The other thing, going back to something that Mike had said at the beginning of this seminar, which is, I had very little experience with numbers, management, corporate finance, net working capital concepts, and other accounting things that you're going to see a lot of in private M&A. right? Maybe not so much in public M&A, but your clients are doing that behind the scenes to get to a share price. So being facile with, optimal corporate finance structures and understanding what goes into a net working capital calculation and what those concepts are and how they might flow through and like inform value, from a client's perspective, is going to be useful to you as you write. Maybe not in the first couple of years while you're doing diligence and other ancillary and more like, process oriented tasks as you're learning the job, but certainly as you get, into your mid-level and your senior year, having that sort of depth of knowledge is going to help you prepare funds flows and cap tables and understand why a company wants a certain debt level versus an equity ratio. And so, I would encourage people to take those types of business finance courses just to get their feet wet if they don't have any background.
And some law schools actually offer cross-listing with courses cross-listed with the business school. And if that's an option for you, I know I did it and it was something that I enjoyed very much. If that's an option for you at whatever school you go to, that definitely recommend that. So this is all great. So we have a couple extra minutes. I'm actually going to put everybody on the spot here. If you don't have an answer ready, that's no problem. But what was the coolest, most interesting deal you've worked on? Obviously, no expectation to divulge anything confidential, but if anything comes to mind, off the top of your head, would love to hear it.
I could go first. So for me, it was the acquisition of the San Diego Padres baseball team. So look, Proskauer is known for sports, but at the end of the day, sports kind of just flows throughout the whole firm. Doing a sports deal is really just like doing any other deal. It's just kind of cool to tell your friends you worked on the sports deal. But you'll find that in M&A deals, one of the fun things we get to do is you often get to celebrate the deal after the fact. And we have what's called a closing dinner. So the closing dinner for that transaction was we got flown out to San Diego to the owner's suite at a Monday Night Football game for the San Diego Chargers. So that was pretty cool. And then sometimes you get what's called a deal toy, right? That the banker designs kind of like a memento for the deal. Oftentimes it's like a glass, kind of little sculpture or something. So for that deal, I got a full-size baseball bat with all of the the purchase price and the names of the parties on the bat. So I have that in my office in case anything ever gets dangerous.
All right. Good luck following up with that. Good luck following that, Josh and Laura. If you have anything to add, feel free. Specialist, by the way, I didn't get one deal toy. It's a big sore subject for me. I've put a lot of hours in, never got the deal toy, but it's okay. All right, Josh or Laura, if you have anything else.
Go ahead, Laura, if you'd like to go.
Yeah, sure. It's actually funny, like when people say kind of like what's your favorite deal or what's the most interesting, I can't top Mike's closing dinner story, so I won't even attempt to. But I think, the deals that I look back on and I say, wow, that was one of my favorite deals. It's always the deals where we had a really good deal team, and I can think about kind of being in our conference room, working late nights, and just kind of like what's funny, cracking jokes, everybody's working together. And those to me are my favorite deals. I've worked on some high profile deals, maybe the ones that are a little hairier, a little less public, are the ones that are really memorable. And it's really just because, the team that we're working with and the client and the relationship. So those to me are my kind of favorite.
I mean, I have so many like fond memories. I'd say private equity deal making has taken me all across this globe to, sitting right in Champs-Élysées and Capgemini's like old school, like 200-year-old headquarters, doing a deal, right, for, private equity sponsor, whether it's like taking Burger King back public through a reverse SPAC transaction in like 2012 with Ackman, right? Or, ended up in Hong Kong bidding on some like Korean supermarket assets. Like there's lots of fond memories. There's tons of closing dinners where you get flown out from private jets to a golf tournament or a race Lamborghinis and things of that nature, although that happens less these days as people are trying to be a little more austere. But I think my favorite deal ever was the one that I did the first on my own. Right. I remember as a third year actually like being handed the keys to a deal, a $300 million buyout, and the partner said, do it. And if you have questions, come talk to me. And I think that one is the one I remember most fondly as the time where it was like, wow, I really can do this. I really sort of grown into my own here. And it was the most memorable because of that.
That's all great. So, all right. So last question here. Now is your chance to plug the firm. And while we're doing this, we're also going to raffle off some fun stuff. So in in 30 seconds or less, and we're going to be strict about the 30 seconds. In 30 seconds or less, why should somebody choose your firm? So Josh, we'll start with you. Why should a student choose Goodwin?
Well, I mean, if you're interested in technology, where, you know, healthcare or where any of that meets, you know, innovation and capital, right? That's kind of where we are. And I think if you're the person who's entrepreneurial in spirit and you like, you know, our core values and share them with us, then like Goodwin may be a place for you, right? Obviously, there's lots of information about what that means. I'll keep it down to 30 seconds here, but if you feel an affinity for this place and a sense of belonging, and you enjoy sophisticated global work up and down the market, from VC work all the way up to large cap private equity and public M&A, then Goodwin may be the place for you.
Great. So, all right. So Goodwin is graciously sponsored a very good prize here, a Yeti 20-ounce drink cup, something. All these swag prizes, I wish somebody would send one to me, but it's okay. All right. So Bertha Mahama, if you're with us, let us know in the Q&A if you're here. All right. Oh, that was quick. All right, Bertha, you're here. We'll get you set up with that. All right, next, Mike, 30 seconds or less. Why should a student choose Proskauer?
To me, it's because at Proskauer is once you show that you are capable and that you could do it, you're going to get so much responsibility super early on. And you could first do that through an excellent selection of pro bono assignments in the transactional space as well. We have a partner who's in charge of pro bono, that there is no shortage of those types of assignments where you get great experience and you're going to get to run with things very early. It's also just a great place to be just in general. I mean, people here are treated like people. It's not like you're not just a cog in the terms of doing a deal. People genuinely care about you and they care about your advancement. Everyone's door is always open and they're always willing to explain things.
Great. So Proskauer, we have a compilation of swag bag, and Kira Scouron. If you're with us, let us know in the Q&A. All right. So Laura, on to you. 30 seconds or less. Why should a student choose Willkie?
Sure. I think someone would choose Willkie if you want to be challenged and constantly learning something new and working in a team-based atmosphere where you're collaborating, you're kind of working shoulder to shoulder with your colleagues every day, and then your colleagues turn into your friends.
Right. Our rule at Summer Associates is you can't say it's the people. I like that none of the answers are just, oh, it's the people. I like that we went a little bit of level deeper. So I appreciate everyone, even though I forgot to mention that. All right. So Willkie has a Willkie tote bag with some other stuff inside. Diana Gregorian, if you're with us, let us know in the Q&A. All right, so before we finish up, just a reminder to check out our future sessions upcoming next week and the weeks to follow. summerassociatehub.com/events. We have our very nice breakout rooms, which all of our attorneys and recruiting team members will be taking time out of their evening to chat with you. So please make sure to stick around and join those. The Word document was posted in the chat. I'm hearing from some folks, or at least one folk, that there's some trouble downloading the Word document. If you have any trouble with it, the links are also in there. And if you still are having trouble, send us an email to the same email address that you got just reply to the confirmation email that you got for registering for this event, and we'll get you set up with the Zoom links. Well, thanks again to this fantastic panel for joining us. I hope everybody can stick around for the breakout rooms. And one thing I like to mention is don't just stick to one and hang out there the whole time. Definitely encourage folks to visit more than one, hear different perspectives, meet different people, and especially because everyone's taking time out of their evening to meet you. So thanks again, Josh, Mike, and Laura for joining us this evening, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, Albert. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.